Yeah. And so what insights have you gained, firstly, from transcribing their stuff in terms of drums, and secondly, from speaking with them on your podcast?
Um, well, I think one like the biggest insight I could give people is like a lot of times there are a few exceptions, but for the most part, regardless of how insane the drummer is, at the end of the day, you really can boil most drummers down to like they got a couple tricks.
Yeah.
They just know how to play those tricks every way, upside down, backward, forward, starting on the beginning of the beat, reversing it, like any rudiment that they, you know, like Calvin Rogers is a great example. Like almost everything, every fill that guy plays that I would transcribe, because I'd be like, dude, what is this fill? It's insane. I would get done with the transcription and be like, oh, it's a paradiddle diddle. So was the last one I did. He just knows how to play a paradiddle diddle in every way imaginable. And every time he does it, you go, wow, what on earth was that? And then you transcribe and you're like, oh, how is this a paradiddle diddle? And I think that that's really probably the biggest thing that I've learned is like a lot of your favorite drummers are not masters of every single rudiment in every single genre and every single thing. They've picked two or three things that they've gone super, 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 super deep with. The exceptions being Jojo Mayer
Yeah.
and Mike Mitchell.
Okay.
And those two dudes, when I transcribe them, I'm like, I don't know what's happening. But for most drummers, like by the end, like by 30 seconds into a drum solo, you can kind of know like, okay, they like doubles more than they like singles. They're a paradiddle diddle kind of person, or they're like a double paradiddle person. Like there's all these things that like over time you just kind of learn like, oh, okay, they really like linear fills. Like, oh, this person is the kind of person that always has eighth notes going on the hi-hat with their left foot when they're there's like all these subtle things that you pick up that like when it boils down to it, those are the thing. Like the reason Mark Juliana from Steve Gadd is because of all these little tendencies and all these things that are usually not as complicated as like we want them to be.
Yeah, there's some comfort in that though. No, is to be like, well, the world of drumming is not actually as big as it can sometimes be perceived.
Oh, 1,000,000%. And that's the thing that transcribing reminds me of. Is like at the end of the day, the hardest thing a drummer has to do is play four limbs at the same time. The rest of it is just memorizing or getting to a place where your brain is comfortable with that sequence of notes in that order at that speed. And at the end of the day, that sometimes is as complicated as like I think transcribing gives you an ability to like view a real-time event, which is like someone playing music outside of the construct of linear time.
Yeah.
And I think that when you can view it's like Rust Cole in the first season of True Detective, where he's like, if a person could view from a fourth dimension, time would be a flat circle. That's like kind of what a transcription is. It's giving you the ability to view something outside of time. And when you can do that, you realize that like, oh, it's just right, left, kick, right, left, kick. When I hear it and when they play it with at speed in that spot with that tone, it sounds unbelievable. But now that I'm seeing it on paper, what it is right, left, kick, or whatever. And like, there is a lot of comfort in that.
Yeah. And so what insights have you gained from speaking with them on your podcast?
I think that like I feel like a lot of my favorite drummers that I've talked to, when you talk to them, you realize that like drums are only one branch. Drums are not the thing. It's a byproduct of the thing. So
Right.
like the reason you love Benny Greb is not because he loves drums. it's because he loves music. And it's because his approach to music comes from whatever's deeper down than music. You know what I mean? And I think that that's the thing. Like, I think more people should be thinking about like how their personality shows up in their music. Like, why do you like, why do I like the Beatles? I don't know. Look into it. Ask yourself, like, why do I, I really like dark music. I like angular sounds more than I like round sounds. Like, there's all these things that I've learned that, like, I think that every musician I've talked to that has that I feel like has something really cool to say or really insightful to say, at the end of the day, you realize like drums is only one of the things that they've gone there with. Like, I had Daniela Mason on my podcast. She's one of my favorite pop artists in Nashville. Like, she loves interior design because whatever she's doing with interior design is getting at the same thing that music gets at. Like, I love whiskey, and it's not because I want to be a whiskey hoarder. It's because like the fun little nuances you can talk about in music and that you can get out of music, you can get out of whiskey. Like, I love TV and I love like True Detective and Mad Men, shows that are kind of dark, shows that are like really character driven. There's a reason for it. And I love the stylized approach to like Winning Time on HBO right now, or like Mad Men. Like, some people don't. But I think it's important as like a creative person, like when I talk to all these people, like it turns out that a lot of times there's a lot of other stuff that they're interested in, other stuff they've thought about, other stuff that, is driving something that's deeper down. And like drums is just one of those things that, and maybe it's like, for me, it would be the most thing that I've pursued, but I've
Yeah.
pursued a bunch of stuff in the same way, because at the end of the day, learning is learning. All the things that helped me learn drums have helped me learn all the other skills that I have in my life. And like, I
Yeah.
can solve a Rubik's Cube and know how to solve a Rubik's Cube because I know how to practice drums. And they're the same thing.
Yeah.
To get better at something is to get better at something. And I think that like everybody I've talked to like knows that in some way.
Yeah. And I think, again, that's hugely comforting to know, because there's a common misconception that your entire life has to revolve around, your identity, your whole identity is this art form, or this, this byproduct of our art form. But it's comforting to know that at that level, it's not for them, it's just one of the things that they do, and they're
Yeah.
a whole person outside of their craft.